In 2004, Microsoft launched Halo 2 on the Xbox, and it demolished any FPS in its path. No one could compete with it, and all gamers were enthralled by it. And Sony wanted to have an answer to it, but what could possibly compete with Halo? They can't get away with this though. They're stealing customers. So it's time to greenlight a new IP, one that will put Halo to shame. Sony starts hyping it up. This will be the answer to Halo. It will be the Halo killer. And then, it's alright. But then you try again, and it's actually kind of good. Maybe one of the best shooters of this generation type of good. Surely this will be a top 5 FPS franchise that will go on for decades. Today, I want to go over the Killzone franchise, what happened to it, and what went wrong. Let's go back to 2001. Sony is at war, not the Hellgast war, but a console war. The PlayStation 2 is dominating the market, but Microsoft just released the Xbox, and more importantly, Halo Combat Evolved. This was the game that changed everything about how people viewed the FPS on consoles. Now, seeing as how Sony was a certified hater of Microsoft, they couldn't just let this slide. Oh no. They decided, okay, that's cool, but you know what would be cooler? Our own Halo. Insert a Dutch studio called Guerrilla Games. Some of you may have heard of them, they're a little bit more well known now. But if you're wondering what they used to be up to, well, at the time they weren't exactly well known, aside from things like Dizzy's Candy Quest, Rhino Rumble, Black Belt Challenge, Invader, and Shell Shock Nam 67. Not exactly the studio you would expect to work on an FPS, that's for sure. But nevertheless, they did. For whatever reason, Sony said, hey kid, I see your potential with Dizzy's Candy Quest, now go and make me a Halo killer. And they did. They would make Killzone. And the hype for it was pretty wild. People were calling it the Halo killer before it even came out. Trailers. Look, we all know nowadays to not believe a game is good just based off a trailer. But back then, let me tell you, people would go crazy saying a game was the best thing ever just based off the trailer alone, even if it was just a CGI trailer. To top it off, this was an original IP, something that gamers are always begging for. So surely, with such hype, the game had to have been good, right? Well, November 2004 finally arrives, and the game wasn't great. But hey man, it wasn't Haze, okay? And if you're a little bit confused on what Killzone is exactly, I'll give you a very brief synopsis to give you an idea. It's a 24th century sci-fi saga detailing the brutal war between the Interplanetary Strategic Alliance, the ISA, and the Hellgast Empire. Following humanity's colonization of space, colonists on the hostile planet Helgen, on which they mutated and grew to despise Earth, developing into a militaristic society under Scholar Visari, who attacks the prosperous world of Vecta. And if you think that the Hellgast seem, oddly familiar, well, they are. I'm not gonna say who they're supposed to be, but I promise you, you know exactly who they are. Again, new IP, so people did enjoy the setting, the enemies, come on, they're iconic, they're super cool looking, at least in my opinion, and aesthetically speaking, the game was amazing. World building is, there for what it can be for a PlayStation 2 era game. This also predated the every game is gritty and super dark and super realistic, so it was actually unique compared to other FPSs at the time, but everything else just really didn't land. The AI might have been lobotomized before the game was released. Your own AI team would usually just stand in front of you while you were trying to shoot, which, to be honest, is something that never really improved that much with the later entries, and the story was unfortunately a bit of a mess. But thankfully, Killzone wasn't remembered for its groundbreaking AI or fantastic story. It's remembered for the multiplayer. While it was technically unpolished even for games at that time, it still managed to garner a following, especially those seeking the more gritty and atmospheric shooter at the time. Also, it was a class-based shooter as well, which is something we rarely see nowadays. No, a hero shooter is not the same as a class-based, they are completely different. And critics weren't very kind to it either, with some even saying things like, this is not the Halo killer, try again. But hey, try again? It means you get another shot. And let's just be honest here, Guerrilla Games kinda got shafted. They were supposed to make the Halo killer in a fairly short time frame. And again, I can't stress this enough, the Halo killer. Back then, nobody was gonna outdo Halo. It just wasn't happening. The only one who can kill Halo is Halo itself. Thankfully, Sony either had a heart back then or realized the nigh impossible task they had asked and actually gave Guerrilla Games a second chance, which is where this story really starts. Now I know what you may be thinking, my modern day gamer. They got a second chance? Yes, video games back then didn't cost the small, but extremely reasonable price of a small country to make. Back then you could experiment and fail and it was okay. Not anymore. So 2006 rolls around and they release Killzone Liberation on the PSP. Yeah man, the PSP. Some of you probably don't even know about that. This one was certainly different. We went from console to handheld gaming. And instead of an FPS, it was more of a top-down tactical shooter. But people liked it. The gameplay was better, and it showed that Guerrilla was willing to learn from their mistakes and adapt, something we don't really see anymore. And while Liberation may not have been a massive hit or the game of the year they were hoping for, it was a step in the right direction. Now it's time for the real comeback. This came alongside the PlayStation 3. If you've been on YouTube for a while and you've ever watched a video on infamous E3 game trailers, I'm sure you've heard about the legendary Killzone 2 E3 trailer. This trailer was insane. Almost too good to be true. People were losing their minds watching this absolute cinema before their eyes. And the best part about it were people saying things like, wow, are these graphics really in the game? And it's funny because of course the response from Sony was, yeah man, yeah, it's totally real gameplay. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. It was a target render, which basically just means it was a cinematic showing of what they hoped the game might look like, not what it actually looks like in-game. Obviously, when the truth came out, there was a lot of backlash. I mean, back then, it wasn't as common for that to happen, right? Nowadays, we see trailers and at the bottom you see the not in-game footage or only render, not actual gameplay. They didn't do that back then. So people genuinely thought that this trailer was the actual game. But here's the twist again. 2009 rolls around, and surprisingly, the game does still look really good. Not the E3 trailer levels of good, but it does look visually appealing. It was one of the best looking PlayStation 3 games at the time, and people did play it. And again, let's just dive into the multiplayer here. Killzone 2 had changing objectives during the matches, and Killzone also featured destructible environments. Of course, not nearly on the same level of Battlefield, but nonetheless it did have that feature. Killzone 2 also implemented an official clan system which allowed for up to 64 players in one clan, where you could have clan versus clan matches and even wager Valor points. Which Valor points were a way to track what rank your clan was. The more Valor points, the higher your clan was in the rankings. Finally, the game did have DLC released that introduced new multiplayer maps, those DLCs being Steel and Titanium, which added brand new maps, then Flash and Thunder, and Napalm and Cordite, which added fan favorite maps from the first Killzone. These DLCs also added the Flamethrower and Bolt Gun. Unfortunately, you can't access this DLC anymore as it has been delisted on the PlayStation Store. At least, it's not accessible through conventional means. And the gunplay was weighty and satisfying. Heck, they even added a cover and peek mechanic to the game, so bonus points for that. The multiplayer was good. The campaign was good. Overall, it was good. This is the Killzone that Sony had promised people back in 2004. Critics loved it, fans loved it, it sold well, Guerrilla Games redeemed themselves, hooray, everyone's happy. But that's not the end. Cause you looked at this video and you saw how much time was left. I see you without your socks on in bed right now. No, don't try and put them on now, leave them off. It's now 2011, and we have Killzone 3. And I just want to enter myself in here and say that this was my OG FPS game. I loved Killzone 3, man. And it may just be the nostalgia talking and little kid me just not having played Halo or Battlefield yet, but man, when I tell you, I don't think I've ever played anything like Killzone 3, I mean it. Genuinely, it has to be in my top 5 FPSs I've played. I don't know how much of a hot take that is, but I will die on that hill that Killzone 3 was an amazing FPS. I know. People prefer Killzone 2 and say it was better, but Killzone 3 was my first experience with the franchise, so I am undoubtedly biased towards it. Some new features that made Killzone 3 stand out was the introduction of an official operations mode. And yes, it's pretty much just like operations from Battlefield 5. Like how Killzone 2 had changing objectives, this mode was a little more fine-tuned and was a narrative-driven experience during the matches. And when I say narrative driven, it's specifically for that particular map, as in the Frozen Dam has its own little narrative as to why the ISA are attacking and etc. Next, the takedown system. Brother, I loved the takedown system. And if I remember correctly, I think there was one takedown where you gouged the eyes out of the Hellghast. If I can find it, I'll put it on screen. Unfortunately, the only way to play multiplayer is with offline bots, as the official servers for Killzone 3 have been shut down. But man, when this game was at its peak, what a time. Anyways, aside from my rose-tinted glasses, let's take a look at where the cracks started to show in this game. Killzone 3 added jetpacks to make the gameplay a bit more fast-paced and a bit more action-packed. For people like little kid me, dude, awesome. But for others, especially fans who enjoyed the slower pace and more tactical feel of Killzone 2, they felt like the game was just chasing trends instead of building upon its own identity. Wow, that kind of sounds awfully familiar. But there was a bigger problem. The next-gen consoles were coming, and of course, a decision came. What about Killzone on the PlayStation 4? This would be the opportunity to really make an impact on the FPS market. New console, new game, better graphics, better gameplay, AI, the whole 9 yards, right? You might even make the PlayStation exclusive shooter. That was their one shot, and they blew it. Side note here. Yes, I know there was another PS Vita game that came out before Shadowfall, Killzone Mercenaries, and from what I've read, people liked it and it was good. I feel like there isn't much to go over with it other than the fact that it was a PS Vita game and was received well. Shadowfall had much more of an impact on the legacy of Killzone than Mercenaries did. And to mention the last quote-unquote game, the Killzone trilogy, it's a remaster of all 3 mainline games. I mean, that's really it. It included multiplayer for 2 and 3 as well as all the DLC in the offline mode, but no multiplayer for Killzone 1, sadly. November 2013, the PlayStation 4 launches, and right there in the launch lineup is Killzone Shadowfall. Like I said, new console. Best opportunity to make a positive impact for your game franchise. You've got this huge marketing push to hype up your game. Visually stunning? Come on, it's a new gen console. I can't stress enough the jump in graphics quality from PlayStation 3 to PlayStation 4. It was actually a pretty big difference. It's like going from watching a video in 360p to like 1080p. So graphics look great. The hype, it's there. But what about the game itself? It's gotta be good, right? I mean, come on, they just started having a good run. No, but just no. Story? I mean, what story? It was not a good story. The multiplayer, it was good. It was still Killzone, but it lost its aesthetic. I mean, look at Killzone 3 and then look at Shadowfall. If you didn't know any better, you would probably think these are 2 different IPs. It lost its gritty, intense war on an alien planet setting, which that's because of the end of Killzone 3, so yes, it does make sense. But it just ends up looking like a generic futuristic shooter. I don't really know how else to even describe the setting. It's just generic looking. So instead of fighting the Hellghast on the homeworld, you are now on Vecta, which is just a sci-fi city with a big wall dividing the Hellghast and humans. And brother, yes, that is pretty much the entire plot. It's just a civil war on the planet Vecta. If we want to dwindle it down to bare minimums, that's really all that it was. The Hellghast, these super evil bad guys, are allowed to be on this super nice sci-fi planet with the people who nuked their other home planet, and nobody thought that this was going to go wrong. Make it make sense. Man, again, these two were trying to wipe each other out, and nobody thought that was a bad idea, to have them live on the same exact planet right next to each other. The concept could have been interesting, but it just didn't work. It also didn't help that the entire game felt more like a tech demo than an actual game, which is a lot of the criticism towards this game. A lot of people who played it will tell you that it felt more like a tech demo than an actual game. Part of the reason is because, again, it had to be rushed out. It was supposed to come out with the new gen consoles, and unfortunately, they didn't have the time to work on it that they wanted to. Originally, I think I remember seeing that one of the lead developers on this said that they wanted at least maybe like another year, so they had to rush through a lot of things, and one of the things that obviously suffered the most was the story. And the guy blames himself for it because apparently he agreed to it. Originally, they didn't have to make it a launch title, but since they agreed to it, they had to meet those deadlines. And that's ultimately what ended up causing so much stress and pressure on them to try and get it rushed out, which it's kind of sad because maybe if they had more time, this could have been a great game and Killzone would still be around. But instead, we have people calling it Killzone Shadowflop, which pretty much tells you all you need to know about how people viewed it. But you know, I mean, no big deal though, right? It just kinda happened with the first game. It didn't exactly stick the landing with unprecedented praise, and yet Guerrilla Games made a comeback, so why don't we just try again? I mean, come on, the PlayStation 4 just came out. We can probably get another 2 to 3 Killzone games before the next PlayStation, right? We let Assassin's Creed and Call of Duty make terrible entries and they keep going, so why not let Killzone? Nope, that didn't happen. What ended up happening was something completely different. While Guerrilla Games was making their flop of a tech demo, a small team within the studio had secretly been working on something new. It was a concept for an open world action game. This was before every other game was open world, alright, so it wasn't that bad yet. And it's set in a post-apocalyptic world where nature had reclaimed civilization and humans rode robot dinos. Yes, Horizon Zero Dawn. Sony decided to go all in on this new IP. Guerrilla ended up shifting all their resources into this IP as well. So now, this studio that had built a reputation for making Killzone was now working on something entirely different. I'm sure most of you already know this as well. When Horizon Zero Dawn came out in 2017, it was a hit. You know, the typical critically acclaimed, beloved game, yada yada yada, whatever. But now, Killzone was just set aside and thrown out. There wasn't an announcement of, hey, we're taking a break or Killzone isn't done. Just nothing really. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad they could find success and still make another good IP. Most companies would have probably gone out of business if they did what Guerrilla did. But at the same time, we lost a pretty underrated franchise. Now, remember the comment I made earlier about we hadn't gotten all open world games yet? Well, once they saw the success of Horizon, that's when we really started to get all of these single player driven games. Most of them being open world or semi-open world. Spider-Man, The Last of Us, God of War, Days Gone, whatever. But Killzone, it just doesn't fit what Sony was pushing now. A multiplayer focused franchise competing with all these single player games just wasn't going to cut it. To top it off, remember when Sony bought Bungie, the original Halo developers, in 2022 and people were thinking that meant Halo was coming to the PlayStation? Yeah, that never happened. But hey, we got Marathon finally. So this ultimately puts us here, 13 years later since the last Killzone game. I mean, we didn't even get a remaster, which to me is kind of crazy. You're telling me they're going to remaster Conker's Bad Fur Day, but not remaster something like Killzone? Come on, man. The community is still there. Like most older games, you have the die-hard fans keeping it alive, hosting their own servers and communicating on places like Reddit or Discord, but overall, I'd say there is no real hype for another game, sadly. Well, aside from me, of course. I'd love another one. So what really killed it though? I'm going to be a little bit more specific here, cause just saying a game flopped doesn't really tell you much. And I wouldn't say there was one specific cause for Killzone failing, it's a few problems. Number one is that Shadowfall being a flop did ultimately diminish the chances of another game being made. This was before Concord, so a game flopping wasn't the worst thing, but it did make publishers question whether or not a sequel was worth it. And again, it was a launch title, which we know how those usually go, right? Really nothing more than an appetizer to show you the new tech of a gaming system. It was also supposed to prove that Killzone was a good PlayStation exclusive to make people want to buy the PlayStation, like how you buy Xbox to play Halo or Gears of War. Unfortunately, due to sales numbers, it gave Sony a good reason to not greenlight another big AAA game like Killzone. Problem number two is that Sony started shifting their focus of what games they house on the PlayStation. Now, if you're a real one, you know that the PlayStation 3 era was filled to the brim with multiplayer games. I mean, we had Killzone, SOCOM, Warhawk, COD, Battlefield. Only real ones know this one. MAG, Resistance, Little Big Planet, so many more good games with multiplayer, right? Now the PlayStation houses more single-player story-driven games, like the aforementioned Last of Us, Spider-Man, God of War, etc. So this shift in what they make wasn't going to increase the chances of making another Killzone either. Problem number three is that the market changed as well. Not only did Sony themselves shift into the single player sphere, but the gaming market as a whole started to shift as well. By the time Shadowfall was barely staying above water, COD was at its peak, and Battlefield was still massive. And then, as many know, the day of reckoning happened, and we got Fortnite back in 2015. So I don't know, man. As much as I love Killzone, I know it was never as popular as something like COD or Battlefield. So for it to have to compete with COD, Battlefield, and Fortnite, and Halo, and Gears of War, all these other franchises, yeah, go ahead and wrap it up. But this brings us to problem 4, the final problem. Guerrilla just found something better. Understand this. You can't be mad at a company for trying to stay afloat. I don't want people to lose their jobs, or worse, the company gets bought out by a bigger company that will just destroy what made the smaller ones special. Horizon was a good game. They had the passion for it, and when a studio finds that passion and it clicks creatively, you follow that. That's just how it works. Killzone had the bones of something great. The Helghast are one of the coolest enemy factions in all of gaming. The lore is actually pretty interesting when you dig into it. The whole thing about the Helghast being humans who were essentially exiled to a toxic planet and had to evolve to survive on it, and then getting invaded by the people who had exiled them. Come on, it's better than, "Sir, we've been attacked by Russia again, sir. What will we do? It's time for us to Call of Duty." Killzone 2 proved the gameplay could be top 5 FPS level. The aesthetic was genuinely unique. No other franchise looked like it. All the ingredients were there, and Sony just walked away. So the question remains, will we see the return of Killzone? Sort of? A new mainline game? Psh, that's not gonna happen anytime soon. The developers have been cited saying they're done with the franchise and want to work on other things, so don't even get your hopes up for that. But a remaster? Maybe. We've seen Sony resurrect old franchises like God of War with a new game, and there's the Ratchet & Clank reboot. Even if it's not a full-on reboot or a new game, they're not above going back into their old franchises and reviving them. And even here recently, we've seen the franchise resurface in the form of a collab with Helldivers 2. So that at least shows us that Sony hasn't totally abandoned the IP. But again, don't expect a brand new one. If anything, we're just going to get remasters. Fingers crossed they would have multiplayer support. In my opinion, the FPS market is extremely starved for something different. And back then, Killzone was that different FPS. So who knows, if we got a remaster and it sold well, maybe they would start to consider it. I just think that Killzone could fill that gap in the FPS market right now. If it's done right, of course. We don't need another Concord, Highguard, or Marathon situation. And look, the community is still there. We have fans who are starving out here, man. Keeping a PlayStation 3 game alive and also keeping the PlayStation 2 game alive by hosting private servers? I mean, you don't do that to a bad game or franchise. You do that to a franchise that deserves better. In conclusion, Killzone was a game that was different, maybe even too different to really be popular in the FPS market. It was born as a Halo clone before it even knew it would be called a Halo killer, and it genuinely grew into a cool franchise, and then it got abandoned when it needed support the most, sadly. And fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on how you view it, Horizon Zero Dawn was the nail in the coffin for Killzone. Is Killzone dead? Officially speaking, yes, the franchise is done, and the developers have completely moved on, but the fan base remains and still survives with the minuscule scraps they have to work with, because I'll be honest, nothing, and I mean nothing, has really scratched that specific FPS itch the way Killzone did. And who knows, maybe if the community gets loud enough, we could get a remaster, an updated game for new gens, or maybe, just maybe, that 1% chance we get a new game. Until then though, the Helghast are just out there, waiting in the dark with those glowing red eyes. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I would love to hear from you guys if you've ever played Killzone and what you thought about it. And how do you feel that we haven't seen the franchise be revived? And a side note here, if you want more of these What Happened To videos, let me know in the comments. That's all I've got for now. I hope you have a good morning, good afternoon, or a good night.